Very good evening to you, Lord Hammond. I suppose,
Good evening.
what's your sense of where the Chancellor sits tonight, having to make really quite tough decisions?
Well, it seems to me that she cannot really break the manifesto pledges that she's set out and repeated so regularly and vociferously. I think her position would be very, very difficult if she did that. So I suspect that number 11 is planning at the moment around a budget that will involve tax increases and spending cuts to try to plug the um, widening hole that she is facing, largely because of the cost of servicing debt, as well as low growth and inflationary pressures, um, and hoping that they can get away with it without having to break that manifesto pledge.
And what's your sense? What would you do? I mean, you're obviously from very different political backgrounds and parties, but I mean, what would you do? I mean, some of these problems are pretty fundamental, aren't they, by the way?
Yeah.
What do you think the Chancellor needs to do in, just over a month's time?
So they are pretty fundamental. Let's just take the politics out of this for a moment and look at it as an economic problem. The problem that Rachel Reeves has got, and frankly, the problem that Jeremy Hunt had before her, is that the economy is just not growing fast enough. And this government has said that getting the economy to grow is the number one priority and an absolutely necessary condition to being able to sustain good quality public services as well as individual prosperity in this country in the future. So the question really is about how do we plug the hole, deal with the challenge she's facing without stifling economic growth. And any economist will tell you that if she tries to fill the hole that she's facing at the moment purely by tax rises, and by definition, tax rises that are very concentrated because they've ruled out broad-based tax increases, then she will further stifle growth. She'll make it much harder to get economic growth in the future. And that puts her in a kind of doom loop spiral where every year she's coming back for more tax increases because the economy isn't growing fast enough. And because of those tax increases, the economy will grow still more slowly the following year.
Indeed,
So
I mean,
she's got to balance. In the ideal world, from an economic point of view, she would deal with this gap in the public finances by reducing public spending. But of course, in the real world, where there are political challenges that she's facing inside the Labour Party, she won't be able to do that. She'll have to do a mix of tax and spending, and she'll have a battle royal within the Labour Party to get through the spending cuts that will be needed as part of that package.
Well, of course, the man who said you can't tax your way to economic growth was none other than the Prime Minister himself. I mean, he said that repeatedly over the last year or so. What's your sense? I don't know if you heard from me a little earlier talking about Brexit. It's clear Labour are in part going to set out a narrative of blaming Brexit for some of our economic woes. Let's park that for a second. There's lots of evidence to suggest that it is a drag on economic growth. We don't want to get into that. But it's more, have we failed as a country to kind of move on from Brexit? And I mean in an economic sense, to actually make it meaningful.
Well, I think we've got another problem on our hands now, that when the British people made the decision, unwisely in my view, but they made the decision to leave the European Union, they were making that decision in the context of a world trading order that was stable and well understood. We had a multilateral, rules-based international system led and policed by the Americans, with organizations like the WTO there to help manage trade between countries. And I think what many people thought was that Britain would simply become a trading nation among many trading nations. Now we find ourselves in a different world, thanks to Mr. Trump, of punitive tariffs, political interference with supply chains, a much, much more difficult environment for international trade. And here we are, a relatively small country with a medium-sized economy, not in any large bloc, not a member of any large trading structure, trying to work out how to protect our economy in this new world order. And I think it's much, much more difficult than many people who did argue for Brexit
Yeah.
were expecting it to be.
Well, I mean, indeed, and we heard from one of your successors, Jeremy Hunt, saying he essentially changed his mind on all of this. But I do want to move on because we're a little tight for time. I want to talk to you, if I can, Lord Hammond, about you being a former foreign secretary, because the other big political story today, of course, is China and this spy trial. What's your sense of what might have gone on here? Frankly, from the outside, it seems a little confusing.
Well, I think probably the single most important lesson here is that in situations that involve our intelligence agencies, it is sometimes very difficult to make public, including through a trial, evidence that would be of a sufficient quality to secure a conviction without compromising the tradecraft of the intelligence services or perhaps exposing intelligence assets to risk. So I've seen this before. It is not that unusual to find situations where prosecutions have to be sidelined or abandoned because it's simply not possible to put evidence into the public space. And I don't know if that's what's happened here because I don't have access to the inner workings of government, certainly to the secret material that may be involved. But it is a very difficult and complex situation, and obviously no responsible government would ever do anything that would compromise the operations or indeed the assets of intelligence agencies.
And just to finish on this, does that then kind of, what you're saying, maybe reinforce what we heard from Dominic Cummings today? And this may go back to your kind of period in government in which he's essentially arguing that China were harvesting huge amounts of data from the government, massive amounts of classified state secrets. Did you recognise that at all?
Well, I can't comment on that because I wasn't in government at the time. I don't have any access to the secret intelligence, the analysis that there will be of any such activity. But obviously, our intelligence agencies are acutely attuned to the risk of foreign powers which are hostile to us or which might be hostile to us, and foreign powers which have a track record of seeking to acquire information by espionage. They're highly attuned to them, and they're actively looking for their activities in the UK to shut them down. And the usual situation, to be honest, is that when people are found who are up to no good, shall we say, they are expelled if they're diplomats, or they're denied permissions and accesses in a way that renders them harmless or less harmful. It's quite unusual for these things to result in a criminal trial.